Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marvelyne Engel, and with me is my co host and awesome producer, also known as my wife, also known as the hotness, also known as Marvelyne. And we are excited to be with you today. Hey, babe.
Hi, I am seriously, we say this often. I'm really excited about today's guest because I think this is such a vital subject. And so I'm doing great. I'm all a Twitter.
Okay. And our guest today is Erin Williamson. Erin, thank you so much for agreeing to spend some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, I can't even remember exactly how you and I were introduced. It may have been through a service, but I was really intrigued by the work that you do, and I thought it played right into some probably extremely compassionate stories. And so, um, give us you're an LCSW. I know that much. Tell us a little more about you and the work that you do.
Yeah. So I am an LCSW and I work with children and youth. We kind of go past the age of 18. So we add in those youth who have experienced some form of sex trafficking. We also do work with labor trafficking, but more often than not, sex trafficking. And we do both prevention work as well as survivor care work. So have a lot of experience working with people who have found themselves in really difficult situations, intersecting with various aspects of the healthcare system, the juvenile justice system, child welfare system. So lots of system involvement and needing lots of support through what can be pretty complex systems.
Complex systems, complex issues all around. So we've got a lot of complexity here today. And I was hoping that maybe we could even start out for very lay people like us. And can we give some definitions around what we're talking about?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to talk about kind of the definition and then maybe also kind of how these kids show up, right? How do we see them? Because this is something that can be really hidden, right? And I think a lot of people think this can't be happening in their communities. And what I can say is, unfortunately, it is. It's happening kind of in every community across the United States. We provide survivor care services in Connecticut, which is generally considered a fairly resourced state, and we have seen it in every county throughout our state, and our prevention services are nationwide. So when we're talking about child sex trafficking, we're really talking about the exchange of any sexual act for anything of value. So it can be for money. It can be for drugs. It can be for basic needs, shelter, food, clothing. It can go to a third party, so it can go to a trafficker who kind of arranges these meetings or dates. But it doesn't have to go to a third party for it to be considered exploitative and for that child to need services. We kind of generally say there's no such thing as a child prostitute. And if you can keep that in mind, then you kind of can have a good understanding of who these individuals are. And oftentimes when they come to the intersection of schools. I will say many of our kids still go to school, right? This isn't what you think about when you think about the movie Taken, where these kids are kidnapped and kind of hidden or physically constrained and can't leave. In fact, a lot of what we see is that it's emotional manipulation. It's promising these kids that they can meet their physical needs, their emotional needs. They can be the parents that they've never had, or the boyfriend, and offer the love they've never had, or help parents pay the rent when their parents are struggling financially. And so a lot of it really has to do with creating an environment and a space where kids can slowly disclose, right? They're not oftentimes coming in through the emergency room with very clear signs of, severe physical violence, right? That would cause people to kind of pause and say, oh, something has happened here. What they're showing up with is maybe an STD, or maybe some bruising or some dental work, because maybe they haven't been to the dentist in years. And what they're doing when they come in contact with these systems is assessing, is this someone who's safe, that I might be able to share a little bit about what is happening to me? And does this person can they handle what I'm about to tell them? Because again, a lot of providers just aren't ready to hear the stories that can come with this level of victimization.
Okay, you just kind of shattered me a little bit, because I was thinking, our family's very fortunate. We probably haven't been exposed to any such thing. Then after hearing your definition, I am thinking, oh my goodness, we probably walk by people like this and interact with people who are in this position so much more than we realize.
Exactly. I'll give an example. I have a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, right? Also live in a community amongst people where I think it's very common to think this doesn't happen, right? My oldest has a cell phone, right? We had to have lots of conversation around cell phone safety and who do you communicate with and how. And, he was at a sleepover the other night, and he woke up at, 1 o'clock in the morning and rolled over, and one of his friends was on his phone. He couldn't fall asleep. He says, "What are you doing?" He was on an app where the goal of the app is to talk to strangers, right? It's kind of like what we would consider a chat roulette. It's what used to be a chat roulette. But the goal is you swipe, someone pops up, you talk to them for a little bit, you swipe again. What is an adult going to think when a 13-year-old boy is on an app where you have to say you're 18 to get in, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, right? That's a vulnerable youth, right? So that's the type of situation where kids, traffickers and predators identify vulnerabilities in kids. And then they say, obviously this is a kid looking for something, right? Most people aren't talking to strangers at age 13 on the internet. And then the trafficker will start to think, what are they looking for? What can I offer them? Are they looking for someone who cares about them, who asks them how their day is, who checks in on them? I can be that person for them. And then slowly there will be a manipulation that will result finally in the exploitation. And it might start with, send me photos of yourself, right? Send me more explicit photos. Now, if you don't meet me, I'm going to share those photos with other people in your family. And so again, I think one of the things that we don't think about when we're introducing technology like that is, we equate it to, you wouldn't go and drop your kid off in New York City and say, I'm going to be back in an hour. Good luck. You certainly wouldn't do that with a 6-year-old, right? But we are handing 6-year-olds iPads and not talking to them really at all about, where they should and where they should not go on the internet, or who they are and who they're not allowed to correspond with. And, then by the time kids become adolescents and are, trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in and trying to reach out to people, they don't have those basic building blocks of understanding internet safety, and they're connecting with the wrong people.
Am I understanding correctly that you're referring to the trafficker as the person engaging, not necessarily that they have a house full of people that they pull out? Am I
Well,
understanding?
so we have seen sometimes traffickers have kind of a single victim, right? So I'll give you another example. We had a landlord and this is not a single incident. This is a couple of incidences. We've had a couple of landlords where parents are really struggling to pay the household rent. And either there's an explicit agreement or an implicit understanding that at the end of every month, the family goes away and the landlord engages in sexual acts with the young daughter. And in exchange, they're not kicked out of their housing. right? So we've had those situations. We've also had situations where we've actually had a couple that said to the foster kids in kind of the neighborhood, we can be a safe place if you ever need to run away, right? So they kind of became known as like the cool semi-parents that foster kids would run to if home was not safe, if their foster placement wasn't safe. But then if they stayed after more than a week, then they would start to get in the discussion of, well, taking care of you isn't free. And, if you could just contribute a little bit, that would be really helpful. And if you don't know how to, get some money, we can help show you how to set up an online ad where you could meet people and kind of help contribute to, we're all in this together. But again, the expectation is you either bring us money or you're not going to be allowed to stay here anymore. And so when the other option is to go back to an unsafe environment, that's not really an option for these children.
So the more you talk, the sicker I feel about the ease of which traffickers can get to victims. And I know we want to get into what do we do once someone has been trafficked? How do we take care of them? But before this, I have to bring it back to my personal things. It's like we've got a 13-year-old that we want to protect too. How, and this is 13-year-old grandson. But how do we, other than talking to them and saying, don't go hook up online with a grown man, how do we help traffic their use of their devices to make sure that the worst isn't happening?
Yeah. And it's hard, right? Because my kids still go to sleepovers. My kids still go out. My kids go to overnight camp, right? We have to realize that, we want to protect them, and the best way to protect them is to resource them, right? So, even starting at 13, but even ideally at a younger age, really teaching the kids in your life, our family doesn't have secrets, right? We just don't have secrets, right? And if anybody ever asks you to keep a secret, I want you to tell them, my family doesn't keep secrets. Because one of the first things traffickers, or really any predator, is going to do is they're going to test out that child to say, is this a child that's going to be able to keep a secret, right? Because if that's a child that's going to go run home to mom or dad or run to grandma and grandpa and tell them what's happening, that trafficker, that, perpetrator, they're going to choose someone else. They're not going to choose your child because your child has said, I have people in my life who I trust, who care about me, and who are paying attention, right? So one of the first things you can do is really create open communication. That is really one of the most important protective factors. The other thing I say, especially to parents of adolescents, is, we have to normalize this time. So one of the things we said to our child is, look, we have family rules, we have household rules. You are also entering your adolescence. And one of the things that you are going to do, it's very normal, is you're going to test those rules. And you might even break some of those rules. And what I want you to know really loud and clear is that when that happens, the most important thing to me is your safety, right? We can deal with everything else. We can figure out the rules. I care more than anything else about your safety, right? And so I don't want you to not tell me something because it happened because you broke a rule, right? That I want you to come and tell me. And I think what we hear a lot of times from adolescents is, well, I didn't tell them because I wasn't supposed to be at that party, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they told me not to leave. I was grounded. I wasn't supposed to leave. Or I knew I was going to get in so much trouble. And so if you can kind of preempt that as a parent and say, look, there are going to be times where you're going to, you might get grounded for a little bit. There might be times where I take away your phone. But the most important thing in that moment is your safety. And we'll figure out the consequences together. We'll talk it through. But then, and this is the really hard part for parents, you have to follow through on that. So when your kid goes out and goes to that party and comes home and says something happens, you have to control your response. You cannot say, I told you not to go to that party. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't gone to that party. Because what you're saying to that child is the most important thing is that you broke the rule. Not the most important thing is that you came and told me what happened. And I'm so proud of you for doing that. And I will always be here for you. And that's really important and also very difficult for us as parents to remember.
No, what a great approach. I love all of that so much. We're big on saying we keep surprises, like, a surprise party or a gift, but we don't keep secrets.
Exactly. Perfect messaging.
But man, my heart is just pounding. Tell me what your organization does.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a prevention education program. It's called Not a Number, and it's in over 30 states at this point. It's really meant for middle school and early high school age youth. And a lot of it focuses on healthy relationships, right? Our goal is to prevent trafficking. But before trafficking, a lot of stuff happens, right? And usually trafficking is based in what is fundamentally an unhealthy relationship. And that might be an unhealthy relationship with a family member, an unhealthy relationship with a neighbor, an unhealthy relationship with a romantic partner, but really talking to kids, because some kids, they live in homes where healthy relationships are not, they don't see that, right? They haven't learned what is that healthy and unhealthy relationship. And so we really talk to them about what does a healthy relationship look like? Also, what are your boundaries, right? We all have different boundaries. Some of us are really comfortable being really close to people when they speak, and some of us need a lot of personal space when we're speaking with someone, right? And those boundaries are probably different. You might have different boundaries for family members, for romantic partners, for friends, for teammates on a sports team. But a lot of times kids have never thought about what actually are my boundaries and how do they change and how will I know if anybody ever crosses those boundaries, right? And then we engage in a lot of skill building, right? So, okay, now you know your boundaries, you know what a healthy relationship is. Let's now practice. If somebody starts encroaching on your boundaries, what are things you could say? What are things you're comfortable saying? And let's practice them, because a lot of times what happens is kids find themselves in potentially dangerous situations. And the reality is, whether it's going to lead to trafficking or something else, adolescence is a time of experimentation, right? It's not uncommon for adolescents to find themselves in potentially dangerous situations. And we want them to kind of go back on instinct of remembering, oh, yes, I've practiced this situation. I've thought about what I'm going to do if someone offers me drugs. I've thought about how I'm going to respond if I'm at a party and I need to get home and I don't feel safe, or if I'm on a date and this doesn't feel safe. And so we want them to proactively think about and then practice those skill sets. Identify who could you go to, and then are any of those people an adult? let's identify at least one adult you could go to, right? As parents, a lot of us hope and think that we're the adult that our children will come to. But it's also really important for us to tell kids, like, look, I hope you come to me, but if you don't come to me, go to another adult. Let's think about what other adults you might think about going to, because kids might not come to you. That's the reality. But helping them to normalize and think about, okay, we have a good family friend who lives a couple doors down. You could talk to them about what's happening if you ever don't feel comfortable talking to us, right? The most important thing in that moment is not that they come to you, it's that they go to somebody and they tell somebody.
Man,
Yeah.
that is so powerful.
Yeah, all of it is, and I, I, I want to, ask you the question about a time that somebody was there for you or that you were there for another, but I'm a little scared of the response I'm going to get because I can imagine many of the situations that you've interacted with have been quite severe, and so I give you the floor and the question about a time that someone was there for you or that you were there for another.
Sure. I think, and I got this question in advance and thought about it. And I think one of the things that comes to mind in both situations is, and both of them are with children, but I think a lot of times kids feel like I'm the only one. No one else understands. No one else has gone through this. No one else cares about this. No one's going to understand me, right? And it's that sense of loneliness and solitude and lack of connection that I think keeps a lot of kids silent and keeps a lot of kids from disclosing and connecting. And I think we also feel that as adults. I don't want to negate that feeling does exist as an adult, but the intensity of it is just so much stronger as a child who's trying to figure out who they are and navigate the world. And so I'm going to start with my own story, and then I'll share a story about a youth I worked with. When I was young, probably about 8 years old, my father got sick with cancer. And he ended up passing when I was 10 years old. And, that's not a common thing. And certainly the sense of like loneliness and no one gets this. And I am, kind of having to grow up at a really rapid pace that my peers are not, was facing me. And we lived in Minnesota. And I remember, without saying anything, my neighbors kind of formed this, I don't even know if it was an informal agreement or kind of this recognition that every time it snowed, one of them would come and clear our sidewalk. And I don't know if you know Minnesota, but it snows a lot. And it snows like 2 or 3 feet, right? And, and people come, not only do you have to take the snow plow to go down the sidewalk, and we were a corner house, right? So we had a lot of sidewalk. We had a driveway that curved down, that went down, and we had stairs. And I just remember that sense of community and people showing up for me and my mom, and this sense of like, they know we're here. They know we care. They care about me. They care about my mom. These are people I can go to when I need something because they show up, right? And they show up regularly and consistently. And every time it snows, I remember I had a babysitter once over, and she was staying overnight, and it started snowing, and she started putting on her jacket and her hat and her gloves, getting ready to go out. I said, "You don't have to go out. They're going to come and plow." And she looks at me like, "You're crazy, Erin. What do you mean they're going to?" I said, "It's true. The neighbors, they plow our driveway and they shovel our steps." And she just could not believe me. And she's like, "Erin, this is ridiculous." And she's like about to go out, and they start doing it, and she goes, get down on the ground." And I said that you don't have to get down on the ground. They're going to do it whether we're home or not. But she just couldn't believe that our neighbors would so consistently and regularly show up for us in that manner. And they did it for years. And so, that sense of being seen and having adults consistently show up is so important. On the flip side, I remember I had a youth disclose that she had been raped, and which is unfortunately not an uncommon occurrence among the population we serve. And I remember her saying, like, just no one cares. Like, no one, this has happened before to me. It's going to happen again to me. No one cares when I'm raped. And I remember looking at her and going, I am about to go to our biggest fundraiser of the year. It was kind of one of those galas that we have. And I said, there are going to be hundreds of people in that room tonight who are going to give their money because they care that you were just raped and they don't think it's fair. And they know that you need support, and you're not going to meet them. You're never going to meet them. But they will show up tonight because they care about you. And there are thousands of people who give every year online to our organization because they care about you. And again, I might be the one that shows up and talks to you, but I'm only here because they donate their money. Because without their support, our organization could not exist. And so I was saying, behind me, like, I want you to imagine that there are hundreds and thousands of people I am representing when I show up to spend time with you. Because this is only possible because of their generosity and because they also care about what's happening. They could not give their money. They could give their money to other things. They're giving their money knowing what we do, knowing who we serve, and they're giving their money because they care about what happened to you today. And she just paused and we just sat there. And she just was like, okay. And we, we don't make kids disclose to people they didn't want to, but I said, at some point I'm going to have to leave tonight because I have to go to that event. I know you don't want to tell your dad, but I really think we should think about telling your dad because I want you to have someone to turn to. And again, all these people, they're going to stay with you when I leave. They still care about you. And tonight, when you're going to bed, I want you to think about all those people in that room who care about you. And she did. She disclosed to her dad, and we came up with a safety plan for that night so that she didn't do any self-harm or didn't do anything. But again, I think it's that concept of really showing kids that there are people that care for them, right? It impacted me. It impacted my life. I think it had a huge impact on why I'm able to show up for kids now in my career. But that's what I would say. I would say it wasn't just like one person. It was when people as a whole kind of you can feel them showing up collectively.
That's what I try to put out in the world. It's like you can feel when somebody is present and attentive, even if there's no words exchanged, right? We can feel that. It's part
Absolutely.
of being human. And if we can give that to those who are suffering and vulnerable, I mean, I think that's what we were sent here to do. So, can you like give information about or websites and socials and all that for your organization and how people could get involved or donate?
Absolutely. Yeah. So our organization is love146.org. And what I will say is there's this wonderful email series. If you go on and you click right on our homepage, you can sign up for a series of emails that is specifically for parents to walk them through introducing technology to children. And even if you've already introduced it, right? What happens if maybe you've gone farther and now you're listening to this podcast and going, oh, okay, how do I kind of wind that back a little, right? It gives really solid language for how to do that. We have a ton of resources on our website for parents. Also, if you are, in a profession where you're interfacing with kids, adolescents, and you're interested in bringing the Not a Number curricula either to your workplace or getting it in your school system, there's information on our Not a Number website, when you click Not a Number, you'll get information on how to connect with us for that curriculum. Certainly, I appreciate the nod to a donation. We really are able to show up for these kids in the way that we do because we do have kind of support from people, and that's we greatly appreciate it. And the other resource I want to tell you, it's not our resource, but it's on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's a resource called Take It Down, and it's a fairly new resource. But if you ever hear about any child whose explicit images have made it out into the internet and the universe, I think there is this sense of kind of once it's out there, there's nothing you can do. And that for sure used to be the case. But now there is a program called Take It Down where you can share the information with NCMEC, and then through their technology, they can actually scrape the internet and automatically take down those images. And then if they reappear, they will again continuously be taken down. So I just also want to share that website because I think it's such an amazing new tool in the field that will help a lot of people.
Well,
That's awesome.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of these resources.
Absolutely. And just side note, are you on a certain board that sounds really fancy?
I'm on a board, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services National Advisory Committee for the it's for the trafficking of children and youth in the United States. So yeah, I do help to take our on the ground knowledge and our on the ground experience and influence policy both at the state and federal level so that we can kind of more collectively and holistically be addressing child trafficking throughout our country.
Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that. And I'm, my head is spinning with people that I know in situations that all of a sudden I'm going, oh my gosh, that happened, but there were resources and family members, etc., that they had a safe place to go to quickly. But I know there's so many people that don't just naturally have parents that are going to teach them that, and even do the opposite at times, probably. But that makes me especially grateful for what you and your organization do for all of the kids that don't have a community that will gather around them and say, hey, we can do this. We can, here's some support.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to create the community, right? If the community doesn't happen naturally, then we're fortunate enough to have, organizations and other entities that collectively come together to create the community so that hopefully all children can have a safe space and grow up, in safety. I do think that that's something everyone can generally agree to, is that children deserve to have a safe childhood.
Absolutely. And that means sometimes, okay, our job's not done just because we got our kids through it, our
Absolutely.
grandkids. We have to look out for everybody's children. So
Absolutely.
Well, Erin, thank you so much for this information and insight today. We appreciate it, and thank you for doing the work that you do. Thank you for continuing to create safe spaces for kids. And any parting words before we head out?
The only thing that I when I'm asked that question, I generally like to remind people is I'm sure that there are people listening today who might have experienced their own significant trauma in their life, right? And what I want to say is two things. One is self-care for those of us working in this field is so important, right? As you heard, I have my own childhood trauma and have had other things happen to me. And also, it's never too late to seek support and services, right? We have a lot of adults who come to us who share with us things that have happened either in their childhood or early adulthood. And so, if you're sitting with this episode and this information and it's weighing heavy on you because either you've experienced something or someone else has experienced something, please take care of yourself. Please reach out for support and services. And please know that there are people out there that care about you too.
Yeah.
That's so
Beautiful.
great.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
And all those links will be in the podcast description. So if you forget, guys, you can go click in it from there and find out more, and definitely get that email subscription thing started because we all need that information.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And listeners, thank you for being on this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. This is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience For any of my services for keynote speaking or consulting or workshops within healthcare organizations, please visit marcusengel.com, and we will see you on the next episode of Compassion and Courage.